Hi, I'm Guil, a developer and JavaScript teacher. So you're here because you want to get started learning JavaScript. Great choice. JavaScript is the most popular and versatile programming language in the world. But I have to admit, learning JavaScript nowadays, like any new technology, can be challenging, especially if it's the first programming language you learn. JavaScript is continuously evolving, and it can feel like it's difficult to keep up sometimes. It's also so incredibly flexible that there are so many ways to do the exact same thing. In addition, understanding programming alone is difficult at first and takes time. But learning JavaScript can also be fun and rewarding. In fact, JavaScript is the first programming language many developers learn. Why? Well, JavaScript is the next logical step after learning HTML and CSS. You learn to write JavaScript to provide interactivity in websites, even code applications for the browser, desktop, mobile devices, and more. And although challenging, JavaScript is one of the most beginner-friendly out of all the programming languages out there, for several reasons. It's quick and easy to get started because it's built right into the browser. It has a simple, straightforward syntax. JavaScript also has a growing, vibrant support community, and the community has built lots of tools to help make your job easier. Also, if you're coming to JavaScript from another language, JavaScript shares many of the core concepts and capabilities of other programming languages, and learning JavaScript can be a springboard into learning other programming languages. You can apply the concepts you learn to just about any other language. What's most exciting is that knowing JavaScript opens up a whole lot of job opportunities and growth, with potentially high pay. For instance, the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics predicts that developer jobs will grow 17% between 2014 and 2024, much faster than the average rate of other professions. And the demand for JavaScript developers is at an all-time high. It's projected to be the most in-demand programming language of 2018 and beyond. So it's a great time to be learning JavaScript. You should be excited. If you're an aspiring JavaScript developer, this video covers what you need to know to get started with JavaScript. There's going to be 3 parts to this video. First, I'll show you some examples of amazing, innovative projects built with JavaScript. Then I'll teach you some of the basics of the JavaScript language. Finally, I'll walk you through the modern landscape of JavaScript development, where you'll learn more about what it means to learn and program with JavaScript in 2018 and beyond. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started. Okay, so now I'll show you some of the projects and features you can build with JavaScript and some of the popular sites and apps currently built using JavaScript. Developers often use JavaScript to make websites more engaging and pleasurable to use. For example, looking at the website for the St. Louis Browns Historical Society, after the page loads, we see a video playing in the background. Clicking on the button in the upper right-hand corner makes changes to the screen, and we now see a menu. Let's click Players, and once this page loads, we can click on the letters along the bottom, and images slide to show the corresponding players. Now let's look at the Wednesday Lookbook Winter website. This site uses 3D graphics and smooth animations, all created with JavaScript. So this really showcases what's possible with JavaScript interactivity and animation. Next is the site for EVS, a production studio. The captivating animations, particle movement, and scrolling transitions are all created with JavaScript. If you want to build a video game, you can do that with JavaScript too. In fact, at Treehouse, the first project you will work on while learning JavaScript is programming this exact game. This simple game runs in a web browser. You move the character around the screen and collect coins to win. JavaScript is also used to build the user interface of popular applications like Facebook and Netflix. Even native apps that get published to the Google Play and iOS App Store, like Airbnb, Tesla, Instagram, and more. Here's a place where you wouldn't expect to find JavaScript: space. That's right, SpaceX engineers are using JavaScript to build the flight interface for the Dragon 2 spacecraft. And NASA uses Node.js, an open-source JavaScript environment, to monitor spacesuits and keep astronauts safe in space. Because of its power and ability to run just about anywhere, JavaScript is one of the most necessary skills for a modern developer. If you're serious about being a developer, JavaScript is a language you'll want to learn and understand. All right, let's write some JavaScript. Now I'll teach you the parts you need to know to get started with JavaScript development, like common data types, variables, arrays, objects, loops, functions, and more. The most common place you'll encounter JavaScript and the easiest place to try out JavaScript programming is in a web browser. In fact, JavaScript got its start in the browser back in 1995. Browsers have a built-in JavaScript interpreter that reads, understands, and runs the instruction in a JavaScript program. To get started now, all you need is your browser and the console built into the browser's developer tools. I'm using Google Chrome, so once you have a tab open in Chrome, you can find the developer tools in the top right menu by going to More Tools, then clicking Developer Tools. You may have used DevTools before to inspect the HTML and CSS of a web page. So here in the Console tab, you can write and run JavaScript. Now, don't worry about every bit of JavaScript code you'll see in this video. You don't have to understand everything or most of what I'll cover. If you pick up just enough to get started learning and writing JavaScript, that's great. In order for JavaScript to do anything, it must be given information to work with. We call that information data. JavaScript supports a number of different data types. Now, I'm not going to cover all of them here, but I will cover common data types like numbers and strings. For example, a number like 20 is a numeric data type. And numbers in JavaScript are used for making calculations like adding, subtracting, computing total costs, even keeping track of a game score, and more. And numbers can be whole numbers or numbers with decimal points. So for instance, if I type 20 plus 50.5 into the console and press the Enter key, the console runs this code and prints the total, 70.5. And JavaScript provides arithmetic operators like the plus sign that perform all common mathematical calculations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So go ahead and try a few other calculations on your own. One of the easiest ways to clear the console is by Control or right-clicking in the console and selecting Clear Console, or clicking the Clear Console icon just above the console output. Another common data type in JavaScript is a string. Strings are used for words, sentences, and other text in your program. And you write a string as a series of letters, numbers, and other characters inside single or double quotation marks. So for example, in between quotes, I'll type the message, "Hi, my name is Guil." Now I'll write a simple command that uses this string to display a dialog box to users. I'll use the JavaScript alert function for this. Alert is a browser-specific function or command used to pop up an alert dialog in the browser. So between the parentheses, you provide alert the message to display. I'll pass it the string, "Hi, my name is Guil." I'll add a semicolon to the end. And when you run this code by pressing the Enter key, it opens a dialog box in the browser and displays the message, "Hi, my name is Guil." So what I've written here is a JavaScript statement. And throughout this video, you'll notice that all JavaScript statements end in a semicolon. While alert only displays a message in a dialog box, browsers also provide a simple command that captures input from site visitors. Prompt. Prompt lets you ask a question and get a response from the user. And like alert, you provide a message between the parentheses. So I'll pass prompt the string, "What is your name?" When I run this code, the browser prompts me to input some text before I can interact with the rest of the page. So in the dialog box, I see the message, "What is your name?" I'll type Guil and click OK or press Enter. And notice how my response shows up in the console. The browser captures the response and returns a value, the string Guil. Now, just printing the return value to the console like this isn't all that useful. Wouldn't it be great if we could also store and use this value in our program, like post it to a list of users or display it somewhere on the page? Well, JavaScript provides a way to store and keep track of information in a program with variables. Variables are one of the most important concepts in JavaScript and programming in general. For example, I'll use a variable to store the message to display in a prompt dialog box. To declare a variable, you use the keyword var followed by the name you want to give the variable. I'll name it question. Then I'll assign a value to this variable with an equal sign, and I'll put a string value into it. The message will be, "What is your name?" This is called assigning a value or putting a value into the variable. So now I'll press Shift Enter to bring the cursor down to the next line without running the code. I'll type a new prompt command, and instead of passing prompt a message as a string, I'll type the variable name question between the parentheses. I'll press enter to run the code, and in the browser, I get the same message as before in the dialog box. But now, if I use the question variable anywhere in my program, the value for question will always point to the string, "What is your name?" You can think of a variable as a labeled box. You can put something inside the box, look inside the box to find out what's in it. You can empty the box, even put something new in the box. While the contents of the box changes, it's still always the same box with the label you gave it. It's common for a variable's value to change in your code. That's why they're called variables. For example, say you're creating a computer game and using a variable named score to keep track of a player's score. At the start of the game, the initial value for score is 0, but it can go up if the player does well or go down if the player makes a mistake. Although the value for the score variable changes from 1 to a higher or lower number, it's still always just one score for that player. Nowadays, you'll see variables written using the keywords let or const, which let you put a value into them like you do with the var keyword, but they have different rules about how you use them and change their values in your program. For now, I'll stick with the var keyword since it's easier to remember that var is a variable. Now that we have a method for collecting and storing information, let's see how to use variables to display different messages in an alert box. I'll use variables together with prompt and alert to create a simple program that asks the user for their name and replies with a short message that displays their name. So in the console, I'll create a new variable named response to store and remember the response, or what a user types into the prompt dialog box. So I'll set the value to prompt, passing it the variable question. Now I'll press Shift-Enter to bring the cursor down, and below the response variable, I'll add alert and pass it the message to display as a string. So the message will be hello, followed by the user's name and an exclamation mark. So the response variable is going to hold the value of what the user types into the box as a string. So to combine the word hello and the exclamation mark with what the user types into the dialog box, I'll first type hello and a space between quotes, followed by a plus sign and the response variable. Then to add the exclamation mark at the end, I'll type a plus sign, followed by the exclamation mark inside quotes. So here, I'm combining strings using the plus sign, which is a common way of joining two or more strings together. Combining strings together like this is called concatenation. It's JavaScript's way of adding strings together to create a bigger string. So now I'll press Enter to run this program. And in the browser, I first see the prompt dialog box asking, "What is your name?" I'll type Guil and click OK. Then I get the alert box with the message, "Hello, Guil." Good. When working on a project in a text editor, it's common to put all of your JavaScript code into a separate file that's separate from your HTML file, just like you would with CSS, for example. So now I'm going to open my text editor, Visual Studio Code, which, by the way, is built using JavaScript technologies you'll learn about later in this video. So you use the script element to add JavaScript to an HTML document. You can place script tags almost anywhere in an HTML file, but most typically you'll find script tags placed either in the head of the page or within the body of the page, just before the closing body tag. I'll place it in the body, and I'll set the source to main.js, which is a JavaScript file I created for my project. When you place your script near the bottom of the page like this, it lets the browser load and display the HTML before running the JavaScript. Next, I'll teach you more features of JavaScript you'll likely work with daily as a developer, like functions, loops, arrays, and objects. There's a whole lot more to learn about each of these topics, but I'll get you started with the basics and later give you more information about where to learn more and practice what you've learned. So functions are at the heart of how JavaScript works. A function is a collection of code that does something. It has a function, right? So for example, prompt and alert are built-in JavaScript functions you can use over and over again in your program. JavaScript also lets you define your own functions. To create a function, you type the keyword function, followed by the name you want to give the function. For example, my functions, then a set of parentheses, and a set of curly braces. In a function, the JavaScript you place inside the curly braces is run whenever the function is activated. Think of the code inside the braces as a set of instructions that you want to run each time the function is referenced in your code. So now I'm going to create a function that contains the same prompt and alert behavior we wrote earlier in the console. The function will ask for a user's name and say hello. So I'll name the function say hello. And between the curly braces, I'll add the response variable and the prompt and alert commands we wrote earlier. So I'll type var response and set it equal to prompt, passing it the message, what is your name? And below that, I'll type alert, and I'll pass alert hello, space, followed by a plus sign, then the response variable, plus sign, and an exclamation mark. So this functionality or set of instructions is now packaged up inside a function. I'll give this file a save, and nothing visually happens in the browser yet, even when I refresh. To activate the programming inside a function, you call the function. And to call a function and run the code inside it, you write the name of the function, followed by a set of parentheses and a semicolon. So when you call a function, you're telling the JavaScript interpreter to jump to that function and run the code inside it. The syntax for calling a function should look familiar. Notice how alert and prompt are also calls to the alert and prompt functions built into JavaScript. Over in the browser, I'll refresh. And now each time the say hello function is called, we'll see the dialog boxes pop up in the browser. Just like you're able to pass information like a message into prompt and alert, you'll commonly pass information to a function to change how the function works. To do this, you add what's called a parameter inside the parentheses when creating a function. So now let's change say hello to a function that accepts a custom greeting and displays it to the user. First, I'll change the function name to say greeting to better describe the purpose of the function. And this function will take one parameter. I'll call it greeting. Then I'll pass greeting into alert. I'll simply copy and paste it and replace hello with greeting. And I'll combine it with response using a plus sign. Now I want to display a space and a comma between the greeting and name, so I'll add them inside quotes with a plus sign before and after this new set of quotes. So the greeting parameter works just like a variable. Notice how I'm using it inside my function just like any variable, like response, for example. So now each time I call this function, it's going to expect information passed into it. So right below the function, let's call say greeting. And between the parentheses, I'll pass the string good morning. Passing information to a function call like this is also called passing an argument to a function. I'll give main.js a save. Over in the browser, I'll refresh. I'll type Guil into the box, click OK, and it returns an alert with the message, good morning, Guil. Cool. Now, if I go back to my program and change the message to have a good day, refresh, it now displays an alert with the message, have a good day, Guil. Good. So as you can see, using parameters with functions makes them more flexible. We can pass different values and get different results. Just like you're able to pass information to a function, you can get information back from a function when it finishes running the code inside the curly braces. So now I'll create a new function called add that will add two numbers together and return the total. Functions can accept multiple parameters, so I'll have this function take two parameters separated by a comma. I'll name them A and B. Now, to return a value from a function, you use the return keyword. This creates a return statement that specifies the value to return. So I'll have this function return the sum of A plus B. Creating a function that returns a value makes the function flexible enough that you can use it in many different situations. So for example, this time I'll output the value the add function returns to the browser console using console.log. And console.log works similar to alert and prompt. You put something inside the parentheses and it's displayed in or printed to the browser console. So for example, I'll pass console.log a call to the add function, and then I'll pass add the arguments 20 and 30 separated by a comma. And right below, let's call add inside a second console.log. This time, I'll pass add the arguments 120 and 310. You'll use console.log frequently while programming. As you'll see later, console.log comes in handy when trying to figure out what's going on inside a program. You can use it to print messages as your programs run and help debug your code. So in this case, the return value is given to each add function call. So over in the browser, you'll see the numbers 50 and 430 get logged to the console. And you could also, for example, make this a function that multiplies two values and returns the result. So I'll change add to multiply, and I'll return A times B using the asterisk symbol. And in the console, let's call multiply once inside a console.log, and I'll pass it the arguments 6 and 8. Give that a save, refresh, and this logs the number 48. JavaScript functions are a valuable tool in your programming toolkit. Functions could let you run a dozen or hundreds of lines of programming by typing just a single line of code. You'll use them constantly in your JavaScript programs to make your programs more modular and easier to update. And at the end of this video, I'll give you a resource you can use to dig deeper into how to write and use functions, as well as everything else covered in this video. You learn that variables in JavaScript hold and keep track of values, like a number or a string. While variables are one of the most important features in JavaScript, each variable can hold only one value. What if you want to keep track of multiple values? For example, the items a user puts inside an online shopping cart, or a list of movie titles and their showtimes. You're not going to create a variable for every single item or movie. There's a better way with arrays. An array is a way of storing more than one value in a single place. You can think of an array as a list of items. Or better yet, if a variable is like a box, then an array is like a labeled row holding multiple numbered boxes. Creating an array is simple. You start with the keyword var, like you're creating a variable, and a name for the array. I'll name this one movies. I'll add an equal sign, a pair of square brackets, and a semicolon. Inside the brackets, we add a comma-separated list of values. And this could be strings, numbers, or a combination of different types of values. I'll add a list of movie titles as strings. So first, I'll add the string Avengers, followed by a comma, and the string Wonder Woman, and a comma. After that, the string Black Panther, and the string The Last Jedi. So to access a single value within an array, we use what's called an index value, which is just a number that indicates the position of that value in the list. For example, the first item, Avengers, is at the 0 index or position. The second item, Wonder Woman, is at the 1 index. Black Panther is at the 2 index, and so on. So to access any of those, you type the name of the array and call out the number of the item you're after using square brackets. So for example, to display the movie title Avengers in the console, you type console.log and pass console.log the name of the array, which is movies, a set of square brackets, and 0. And over in the console, we see the title Avengers in the output. Similarly, to access the last item in this array, you'd write the index 3. And as you can see, that outputs The Last Jedi. There are lots and lots of ways you can work with arrays in JavaScript. For example, JavaScript's built-in push method lets you add one or more items to the end of the array. So if I type movies.push, and inside the parentheses, add the string ladybird, and then if I log the value of the movies array to the console and refresh, you'll see the movies array and the console output. And notice how ladybird was added to the end of the array. So now ladybird is at the index 4. Or you can call pop on an array to remove the last element from the array. So I'll change this to movies.pop. And now the last item of the initial movies array, the string The Last Jedi, has been removed from the array. Arrays also work closely together with another common feature in JavaScript, loops. Loops are a powerful tool in programming. A loop is a way to repeat the same actions a certain number of times. Now, there are many different types of loops available to use in JavaScript, but they all essentially do the same thing. They repeat an action a given number of times. So here I'll cover 2 common ways you might see loops written in modern JavaScript. First is the for each loop. For each is simply a loop that accesses each item in an array. So for example, instead of manually accessing each element in an array by index, like I showed you earlier, we can use a loop to do it for us. So we could, for instance, write a loop that grabs each movie title in the movies array and converts them into an HTML list with links the user can click. To write a for each loop, you first put the variable name of the array, then dot for each, and a set of parentheses. Inside the parentheses, you provide for each a function to run and complete once for each item inside the array. You'll hear this type of function referred to as a callback function. For this example, I'll write a function that pops up an alert box for each movie title in the movies array. The function will take one parameter. I'll call it movie. The parameter movie represents the current element or movie title being processed here in the array. And notice that there's no name after the function keyword this time. Because it has no name, it's called an anonymous function. You'll often use anonymous functions to pass functions as parameters to another function. So inside the body of the function, or between the curly braces, we can do whatever we want with each item in the array. So I'm going to pop up an alert dialog box for each movie title in the array. I'll type alert and pass it movie. So for each is going to call the function passed to it for each element in the movies array. When the function is called, a movie title is passed into the movie argument, then the next, and so on. The loop stops when it's reached the end of the movies array, and there are no movie titles to log to the console. So this is just a simple example of how loops in JavaScript manage the process of accessing each element in an array for you. Many programmers find for each easier to read than some of the other ways of writing loops. The code in a for each loop is easier to understand and usually involves less code. Most of the time, you'll see the callback function or the function being passed to for each written as an arrow function using the new fat arrow syntax. This is a new, shorter syntax for writing functions in JavaScript. For example, I can shorten the function inside for each by replacing the function keyword and parentheses with movie and a fat arrow, which is just an equal sign immediately followed by a right angle bracket. Better yet, arrow functions with one statement, like this one, can be condensed to one line. So I can place everything on one line. Another way you might write a loop is with the for of loop. Like for each, for of creates a loop that repeats an action a given number of times. You create a for of loop with the keyword for, followed by a parentheses and curly braces. Inside the parentheses, you provide for of a variable that represents the current item being processed in the loop. This is very similar to the movie parameter we just used inside for each. So I'll again call the variable movie with var movie. And you could also use the let and const keywords I mentioned earlier here in place of var. Now I'll follow the variable with the keyword of and the name of the array we're looping over. In this case, movies. Inside the curly braces, you provide a statement or action to be carried out for each element that gets passed into the loop. I'll simply log each movie title to the console with console.log and pass it movie. So as you can see, this loop statement is pretty simple to read. It almost reads in plain English. For every movie of the movies array, log it to the console. I'll give this a save, refresh the browser, and now over in the console, we see a list of all the titles stored in the movies array. So you've already seen two ways to store data with JavaScript, a single value in a variable and a list of values in an array. Now it's time to talk about JavaScript objects. Objects are actually a really big subject in JavaScript. In fact, JavaScript is often referred to as an object-oriented or object-based programming language. As you learn more and more about JavaScript, you'll discover that most everything in JavaScript is either an object or can be treated as an object. The simplest way to think of an object is something that has properties and methods. A property is like a variable that belongs to the object, and a method is something the object can do or that can be done to the object. There's so much you can do with objects. For this video, we'll focus on one specific use for objects, to store and access data. To create an object, you start by assigning what's called an object literal to a variable. So let's create an object to hold various pieces of information about a movie. I'll name the variable movie. You learn that square brackets create an array. Well, to create an object, you use curly braces. Curly braces represent an object. So JavaScript objects let you store data as what are called key value pairs or property value pairs. A key or property name is kind of like a variable name, and a value is like the value of that variable. So in other words, you can think of an object as a single item that holds multiple variables. Inside the curly braces, I'll add the property title followed by a colon and a value. I'll set the value to the string Wonder Woman. You separate each property value pair with a comma. So I'll type a comma, and below that, I'll add one more property, time, and set the value to the string 2 p.m. Keep in mind that you can add any number of properties inside an object. Here, we're just adding 2 for now. So as you can see, objects act like data containers. They help keep related data grouped in one easily accessed unit, which simplifies data handling. So for example, you can pass an object and all of its properties as an argument to a function. So the most common way to access properties of an object is with dot notation. So for example, I'll pop up an alert box that displays the value of the title property. So inside the alert, I'll type the object name, which is movie, then add a dot followed by the property name, title. I'll give this a save, and when I refresh my browser, you'll see the movie title Wonder Woman in the alert box. You can even create new properties on an object using dot notation. For example, to add a status property to the movie object, you'd write this, movie.status, and I'll set it equal to unavailable. This not only adds a property named status to the object, but it also gives it a value. So now, if I log the movie object to the console with console.log and pass it movie, In the console, we'll see an object logged and all the properties and values for the movie object. And notice that it also includes a new property, status, and it's set to unavailable. It's common to combine objects with arrays by making an array of objects. In other words, you can place a series of objects inside an array. For example, I'll bring back the movies array from earlier by typing var movies equals square brackets. Inside this array, I'll add 5 objects separated by a comma, and I'll paste them in so that you don't have to watch me type them all. So as you can see, each object contains a title property followed by a time and status property. So now, below the movies array, I'll write a short program that displays a message based on the value of the status property. So if status equals available, the code will print a message to the console displaying the movie title and showtime. Otherwise, if status is equal to unavailable, it will print a message saying that the movie is sold out. So I need the program to look through each object inside the movies array and check if the value of status is either available or unavailable. I know that a loop offers a way to repeat the same actions a certain number of times, so I can use any of the 2 loops I talked about earlier. I'll go with a for of loop. So below the movies array, I'll type for var movie of movies. Inside this loop, I'll need to create the actions to be carried out for each object that gets passed into the loop. So if status is available, display a message. If status is unavailable, display a different message. There are many times in programming where you'll need to make a program behave differently based on conditions within the program. You can make a program react to different situations by using what are called conditional statements. A conditional statement can be as simple as, if this is true, then do that. Conditional statements begin with the if keyword, and after if comes a set of parentheses, and inside of the parentheses comes the condition. The condition is just a simple test whose answer is either true or false. I'll follow that with a set of curly braces. And inside the parentheses, I'll test if the status property is equal to available by typing movie.status triple equals the string available. So now inside the curly braces, you put the code that runs only if the condition is true. So here, I'll add a console.log. And once again, I'll use the plus sign to combine several strings together with the value of an object's title and time properties. And remember, to access the value of an object's property, you use dot notation. So first, I'll add a set of quotes that says the movie, followed by a space. Outside of that, I'll use the plus symbol. Then I'll access the object's title property with movie.title, follow that with a plus sign, and then a set of quotes. Inside the string, we'll pass in space, then the words plays at, and another space. Outside this quote, and outside this string, we'll type a plus sign, and then access the time property with movie.time. So this condition here is like a test. It asks if the value of the status property is equal to the string available. The triple equal sign here is called an equality operator, and it's used to test if 2 values are exactly the same. And if they are the same, then the condition is true and the code inside the curly braces runs. You'll often hear conditionals referred to as if-else statements. So finally, we'll provide code that runs only if the condition is false using an else clause. It's optional, but an else clause is often used as a fallback for when a condition isn't true. You add it to a conditional statement like this. Type the keyword else, and the code you want to run if the condition is not true goes inside a pair of curly braces. Inside the curly braces, I'll type console.log, and we'll print a message to the console saying that a movie title is sold out. But this time I'll do things differently. Instead of using quotes and the plus symbol like this to combine multiple strings into one, I'll use what's called a template literal. To create a template literal, instead of single or double quotes, you use the backtick character. So inside the backticks, I'll type, sorry, the movie. And you no longer need to use a plus symbol to insert the value of a variable or property into the string when you use a template literal. Instead, you wrap the property inside a $sign and a set of curly braces. The $sign curly braces syntax will insert the value into the string, which in our case will be the value of the title property. So let's do movie.title. And we'll follow that with is sold out. All right. So as you can see, template literals offer a lot of convenience when creating strings. They're easier to write and read. So finally, I'll change the strings inside the if statement to a template literal too. First, I'll remove all the quotes and plus signs inside the console log. Then place backticks around the message and add a $sign and curly braces around movie.title and movie.time. All right, I'll give main.js a save, head over to the browser, refresh the page, and good. In the console, we see the sold out message for Wonder Woman and Black Panther only, while the rest of the titles show the available showtimes. That was a lot of information to take in. Now, I just wanted to show you what's possible using basic JavaScript features like variables, arrays, objects, loops, and conditionals. If you didn't understand everything or think that you can't remember everything I covered, don't worry, that's completely normal. In fact, most programmers don't remember everything either. It's common to head over to Google or a resource like Mozilla Developer Network frequently to get a refresher on how these features work. This was just a tiny first step into the world of JavaScript programming. You're not going to immediately power robots, spacesuits, and rocket ship interfaces with what I just covered, but once you've got the basics down, you could work with JavaScript in all sorts of fascinating ways. So next, let's walk through the modern landscape of JavaScript and what your JavaScript learning journey in 2018 and beyond could look like. JavaScript is everywhere and is being used in all aspects of development, from software to hardware. Although originally designed to run in the browser, JavaScript can be found in many different places. For instance, JavaScript is the only web-based programming language that can run on both the front end and the back end. Writing JavaScript that runs on the front end, or client side, means you're writing JavaScript that runs in the browser. Client-side JavaScript is what allows user interactivity in web pages. This is usually done by using the Document Object Model, or DOM. For example, Google Maps uses client-side JavaScript to let you interact with a map by moving it around, zooming in and out, and more. Writing back-end or server-side JavaScript means that instead of writing code that executes in the browser, you're writing code that executes on the server. Server-side JavaScript is delivered by the server and loaded by the browser. Writing JavaScript for both the front-end and back-end portions of an application is known as full-stack development. Now, how does JavaScript run on the server? Well, Node.js is a popular framework for developing server-side applications with JavaScript. Node is a server-side implementation of the JavaScript language. So instead of using a back-end programming language like Python, Java, or PHP, you can write the back-end of your application in JavaScript. Since Node provides a way to run JavaScript outside of the browser, you can use it to build anything from command line tools to web servers and more. Did you also know that there are different types or flavors of JavaScript? For example, ES5 is an earlier version of JavaScript that's implemented in all browsers. And ES 2015, also called ES6, is the evolution of ES5. It's now the established standard for writing modern JavaScript. The JavaScript programming language keeps evolving year after year. This means that there's going to be smaller and more iterative releases of the language each year. The future versions are referred to as ES 2016, ES 2017, and beyond. JavaScript also comes in the form of something called a type checker. Developers use a type checking tool like TypeScript or Flow in favor of plain JavaScript because they can catch mistakes early and identify certain types of problems before they run their code. Type checkers make developing apps more maintainable and make it harder to introduce bugs in your code. So I just wanted to point these out to you so that if you come across terms like ES6, ES 2015, or TypeScript, you'll know that it's all just referring to JavaScript. You can do some really complex things with JavaScript, and there are many ways to do the exact same thing. You'll see and hear lots of varying opinions favoring one method or style over another. So to help you make some of the low-level decisions, increase efficiency, and build projects faster, developers often use a front-end JavaScript framework or library. A common use case for a JavaScript framework is to build single-page web applications that run in the browser. Now, some frameworks and libraries even help you write modern JavaScript using best practices from the start. For example, React, developed by Facebook, is one of the most popular front-end JavaScript libraries. It offers a way to easily break the user interface of an application into manageable, reusable chunks. Vue is another popular framework that shares many similarities with React, except that Vue offers more tools out of the box, it's smaller in file size, and a little easier to pick up. Angular, on the other hand, is a full-fledged JavaScript framework with more functionality than most JavaScript frameworks and libraries out there. Angular, maintained by Google, is referred to as a complete solution because it comes with all the tools necessary to build complex single-page web apps without dependency on any other frameworks or plugins. The JavaScript ecosystem is evolving quickly. Now, earlier I mentioned that space programs like NASA and SpaceX use JavaScript. JavaScript is also used in native application development, virtual reality, even to build chat and voice-controlled bots, and just about anything you can think of. For example, the framework React Native makes it possible to build native apps that run on your iOS and Android devices using only JavaScript. And there's an amazing framework called Electron that's used to build cross-platform desktop applications using just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The text editor I used earlier, Visual Studio Code, and the popular messaging tool Slack, for example, are built on Electron. Developers are using JavaScript to create virtual reality experiences on the web with React VR, a library that lets anyone with an understanding of JavaScript rapidly build and deploy VR experiences using standard web tools. JavaScript also runs on hardware, so it's capable of running on microcontrollers, which makes it ideal for Internet of Things or IoT devices. An IoT device being any physical device with an on and off switch that can connect to the internet and with other IoT devices. For instance, wearable devices like the Fitbit, smart home devices like the Nest, and voice services like Alexa can be controlled and powered by JavaScript and Node. Even mirrors. JavaScript is being used to create smart mirrors that display calendar information with weather and traffic updates. So don't be surprised if you find out that JavaScript is being used to power your Wi-Fi connected coffee maker, headphones, or washing machine. So as you learned, JavaScript is anything but boring and stagnant. Long gone are the days when JavaScript was a novel, browser-based language. You should be excited that the programming language you've chosen to learn is one of the most powerful, flexible, and sought-after technologies out there. Learning new technology is hard, and one of the hardest things about approaching learning JavaScript is figuring out what you need to know when you don't know what you need to know. But it doesn't have to be that way. I'm a teacher at Treehouse, an online school where you learn at your own pace. And Treehouse has on-demand content that includes videos, quizzes, and code challenges that will teach you HTML, CSS, and just about everything you need to know to get started learning JavaScript. So click through the link in the description to start your free 7-day trial at Treehouse and get started learning JavaScript. I'll see you soon.